I'm on my fourth startup, and I am older than I look, or actually I think I am exactly as old as I look now.
21, right?
and some, yes, an order of magnitude, unfortunately, out.
63.
Yeah. Something like that. It feels like that, I think. And basically, yeah, done 4 startups. The first was a banking app helping children to learn how to manage their money. And the second is a company called Curve, where you store your debit cards and credit cards on a single card and do lots of cool things with it. The third was quite a biggie. It was Monzo, and I helped to scale that into a unicorn. And then the fourth, Cherrypick, is a meal planning and groceries app to make it really easy to get all that stuff sorted for busy families.
Monzo was the big one. And when you came in, it was about to take off on its rocket ship trajectory. And you came in as COO, and you built your team from 30 people to 1,000 people in 2 years, which is wild. What tends to break when you scale teams that quickly?
The quick answer is everything. I remember through this period, I'd read Eric Schmidt's book on how Google works, and he had implemented a kind of scaling boundary where they could only capped it at basically doubling each year. And I remember us arrogantly thinking, we don't need to do that. This is comparing this to Google at the same stage. And we were growing like crazy. Our customer numbers were just going through the roof. When we hit the 1 million, and then we hit 2 million just so quickly after that. And we just needed to get people in through the door. So the first thing was learning how to hire at scale. And you kind of think about that in all the things that you were doing, you're trying to just do it in a more kind of maximized way, or with this multiplying factor. We ended up doing things, we do these kind of hiring days at the weekend where we're making kind of 20, 30 offers in the day, which was kind of hugely exciting. But you've got a big risk then about quality and the productivity of those new folks coming in. It kind of goes down. Then you've got to train them up, and there's a lot of complexities around that. So kind of getting the hiring process so that it's still good even when it's working at that pace was very tricky. One of the things I think about hiring is I liken it to this kind of a race over a meter. You're trying to establish if someone's a good runner. And really, you just got this tiny, tiny window into the person. And what surprised me so much is that people often just establish if you can talk. And it's just such a bizarre thing to do. Imagine if you are trying to find it, if someone's a good runner and they're just sort of like, oh, I run so well. Oh my goodness, if you saw me run, you just would not believe my running. I'm just so efficient and so fast. I want to see them run. And so every hiring process that I've done, I figure out a way where we get them to do the job, even if it's very briefly, ideally with a little bit of pressure, because normally that is a part of the process, like normally in the job. You need to be able to do this stuff with a little bit of stress, and especially for Monzo. So we actually got people to write responses for if they were coming into customer support, or look at kind of operational tasks. They're doing kind of ops jobs and so on. So that's kind of one key principle. As you have a lot more people coming in, you've got this very accelerated path of people going from the individual contributors into managers. And that's a real process in itself. And I remember my own journey on that, where I was kind of champion doer. And the first time I became a COO, actually, I needed to become this more orchestrator of doers. And I remember the coach at the time that I had giving me that exact phrase, like stop doing and instead coordinate lots of other people, which I really failed at on that first occasion, and then kind of gradually figured it out with future roles. And so I had to train this in other folks, kind of coach them on it to become managers. And normally they were up for being manager because they were great at doing the tasks. And this was a different skill set. And so that was a fascinating process of just using lots of analogies, kind of like player coach when you're on the sidelines, look like you can't actually get on the pitch anymore. You need to do this, everything kind of from the side. as if you're Alex Ferguson or the conductor of an orchestra. These type of analogies, and people began to get it. You're kind of an editor, not an author. If you're the one actually doing the task, then something's gone wrong. And that seemed to really help. And then really interestingly, you've got this set of new managers, and they quite quickly became managers of managers. They had to train other people to do that. So I remember getting together that group of managers and sort of saying, okay, look, you're now going to become managers and have sets of people, because just this triangle is kind of growing up beneath you. This sort of pyramid is rising. That's a really fascinating process, and getting them to sort of remember how it was on the journey and seeing if they could train others in it. The really sort of sad thing, I suppose, just the honest, brutal truth is that people imagine the pyramid is growing and they sit at the top of it and it just kind of rises underneath them. But the reality is some people just reach the limit of their skills, or especially when a company is scaling at that pace, you scaling your skill set at the same speed is an incredible achievement. And you do occasionally see this when you're looking in the papers at success stories and other companies, even founders that have managed to stay the founder and stay at the top, stay the CEO for the whole journey. It's really incredible. And they've reinvented themselves probably every 6 months to do that. And you even need to know what the skill set is that you need in 6 months' time. Otherwise, you're already behind. So you've really, it's a very conscious, intentional skill to do that. And not everybody can. And so as this pyramid is growing, actually for some people, the pyramid's kind of coming from the side, and some of the pyramid is all kind of coming on top of them, and you're hiring in other people who then become their managers. And the one thing I wanted to do was be very honest about that and try to prep people that it was a thing that was going to happen. And I would always try to say, look, this is the skills that you're going to need for the next step. And maybe you're going to get there, and I'm going to give you everything that I can, do everything that I can to try to help you if you're willing to put the work in. But if it doesn't work out, we're going to go and hire your boss, and I'd like to do that together and be part of that journey, so that you hire somebody that you're really inspired by and you're going to learn by, and who's kind of been on this journey before. And that was pretty amazing. And I think that I did a decent job of sort of always prepping people. People weren't always happy with it, but at least they knew it was a thing that might happen. They might still have thought, this could be me. I could be the head of this department, the head of this team. That doesn't always work out. And in some cases, unfortunately, they really don't work out. You've got to say goodbye to people. And I guess I got good at that as well. If you're going to get good at hiring, you get good at firing. Because of the pace at which we did it, there had to be a little bit of the use of the probation period. And I feel like people don't really get what probation is for. Probation is this, it's a real thing, because that hiring is happening over 1 meter. This race over a meter, you really don't get to see much. 3 months in probation is fantastic. In that time, you'll really get to see someone doing the job. Now, of course, your hiring should have been great, and the probation should be a breeze. But I did make the 3-month point a genuine milestone. And it was a real moment of saying, do we want to keep this person? Because it's much, much harder to say goodbye after that point. And it did increase the number of people, I guess, that we would say goodbye to in that point. And then your next point is at the kind of 2-year mark, where you're looking again and just sort of saying, okay, is this person going to be in this for the long, long term? And unfortunately, that could be a moment where you would say goodbye. And there was quite a bit of doing that, which is just going to be a part of the sort of error factor in a process that's going fast and getting scaled very fast.
Wow. That's a lot. I love it.
I didn't even get into like culture breaks, comms breaks, and there's so much more to say. But
we'll get into those, because I love this topic so much. So we've got this race over a meter, and you can try and optimize that as much as possible. But realistically, it's just a race over a meter, and it's just someone talking about how well they do the job. And especially if you're doing these hiring days where you hire 30 people in a day, you can't really get them to do much of the job, really. However, if we think about how you hire now in Cherrypick, and it's maybe less intense, not trying to hire as many people as back then. Specifically, this point of when someone is doing a task in an interview process and you're putting pressure on them, what does that look like in practice?
So I think about when I had an EA, we were hiring for an executive assistant, and I'd set up a fake inbox of a whole bunch of emails. And there was some silly stuff in there, and there was some serious stuff in there. And I gave them half an hour to make sense of it and just tell me what my priorities were. And it's just such a brilliant exercise, because it's amazing, even just across 3 people, they would approach the task completely differently and potentially even come up with different things. There wasn't even necessarily one right answer, but there was definitely some stuff in there that was urgent, important. And I got an opportunity to even see their process. So how is it that they presented to me the priorities? So it's a super simple example of just, that is the job. Me having a kind of very messy inbox, and I still do to this day, I need my assistant to be able to kind of make sense of that. And sometimes in a very short space of time. So if our stand-up's at 9:30, actually we've shifted our stand-up, and I can talk about that later. But we like to, you don't have long to basically kind of get ready for that. And that's the sort of thing that I think is appropriate. If you've got a designer, actually get them to do some designing. If you've got a product manager, then you give them a product challenge. If you've got a founder's associate, then I'll give them a case study of a real problem that we solved. And sometimes in those case studies, I've found myself learning from the founder's associate. They come at it with a new framework, a different way of thinking. And I'm like, okay, great. This is going to be a great hire. And that's all from a 30, 45 minutes. That's how you take that kind of race over the meter and turn it into something that's kind of you are going to see them running a bit. You can still establish a lot in a really short space of time.
So maybe a helpful heuristic for this is, what would the 30 or 45 minute condensed version of this role look like in a task?
Yes. Yeah. I think that is pretty good. And, we have multiple interviews, and at Cherrypick, I tried to take the best things that I'd learned. And in fact, I've done this for the company overall. The best things that I'd learned across 3 startups that were all great at certain things, and just pull that into this version where I was like, okay, I'm running the show here, and I'm setting this company up from scratch. And for the first time being CEO, I'd been COO 3 times over. So what was the type of company that I wanted to build? And in the hiring process, I figured that there were these 2 different lenses that you really need to look at this from. You have the, can they do the job? And so I'd call those the hard skills. And that's different by role. So for an executive assistant, it's the ability to sort of just take a whole bunch of different stuff and quickly turn that into a set of priorities, and actually kind of sometimes make decisions as I would. So there's a real kind of trust involved in that. And you've got to try and get to the heart of that in a short space of time. Whereas for a product designer, it is the quality of UI, the UX, the design thinking principles, the process that they're running. And then you've got this other side, which is what I'd call operating principles. And weirdly for me, I find a lot of people don't spend enough time on that. And yet actually that's the trump card for me in any hire that we make. So the crazy thing when I was starting Cherrypick is I had a better sense of how I wanted the company to operate than I did about exactly what we were going to do, like what we were going to build. So I just got such a good idea about what had been the amazing things that had really helped other companies that I had seen outcompete. And I'd distilled it into these 3 ideas of thinking big. So actually kind of having the sense of scale and ambition to really make a difference. Of speed as a habit, so kind of moving fast and turning that into a process and just a kind of way that everything happens, kind of today, not tomorrow mindset. And then this leave it better of just whatever you're doing, whatever you're touching, and at whatever level, whether it's you as an individual or us as a company, we try to kind of leave things better than we found them. And I test for that as well. In the interview, we test for that. And that's a separate interview. It's going to be me or my co-founder really looking for that. We'll often have another interview on it where it's folks in the team, but we're the ones that will kind of make the call. And then I've got this super simple matrix where you have to be outstanding on one of those factors. So you need to be outstanding on the role or outstanding on the operating principles, and then good, at least good, on the other. And so what you can have, and by good I mean kind of very good, you can have a situation where you have somebody that is very good on both, and that's a no. And those are the ones that are really tricky. So in the hiring debrief where you're making the decision and everyone's just like, but they are really good and we just need to get this filled, and wouldn't it be better to have another product manager than not? And you have to say no. And come away from it and be like, all right, back to the drawing board. Let's get out there and find our person and make sure that they're outstanding. And the one that I'm most interested in is the operating principles. And they've got to be able to do the role well. That's kind of a given. But I love it when you get someone who's outstanding on the operating principles, because they're going to represent the culture and actually help build other people who can kind of operate in the same way as they do.
But what does being outstanding in the operating principles actually look like? What does being outstanding and thinking bigger? Do you have these all like written down in terms of you grade people 1 to 5 in terms of 5 is outstanding?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if they say something like this, then that classes as being outstanding.
Yeah, you build a scorecard. There is a lot of judgment involved, so you do need to rely on the fact you've hired other people who get it and know like what it is, this kind of secret sauce that makes the company great at what it does. I stole some principles here from Amazon back in the early days before I went into my first startup. I did secure a role at Amazon through 6 stages of interviews. And they have a fascinating, this was a number of years ago, I don't know if they still do it, but they had a fascinating process where they just ask you a lot of stories about your experience, and they're testing to see if the way that you approached problems aligns with their operating principles. And Amazon, whether you love them or hate them, or reluctantly love them like I do, their operating principles are phenomenal. And so we try to do a similar thing, especially for my interview. I've got a set of questions where I just try and get really under the skin of how they might approach a particular task. So that might be a super simple thing, like where have you speeded something up, or where have you felt frustrated by a kind of outcome. And that can be an interesting one, because if you ask them, where they felt frustrated, often they'll talk about a thing that went too slow, and then I'm listening for like, and then what did they do about it? And if the answer was, I just moaned and we just had to accept that it was a rubbish project and I couldn't wait to get off it, then you're like, okay, that's a no hire, right? If they tell you about they just went and learnt some new techniques so that they could speed things up, they talked to their manager and got them to change things up. They really inspired the team to shift things. They spoke with the client and got rid of some of the hurdles. Then you're like, okay, this is a person that is going to be great here and fit in really well. So it's that if you are really clear on what the definition of your operating principles are, and we are, and we evolved them. Now we've stopped evolving them because they're kind of pretty set. What we have works for us, and we know kind of what the secret sauce is. Then you can test for it. It's all just about kind of getting it clear, getting it written down, making sure everyone else is clear on it, and testing for it.
These operating principles are great in terms of like their one line, like think bigger, go faster, but actually how, and they sound very similar to values. I'm assuming you chose operating principles because...
I hate the word values, but yes.
There we go. Okay. Well, why do you hate the word values?
Let's think about it. Values, I think values got a bad rep from, and this is showing my age, there's stuff like Enron, and stuff like the Anderson consulting kind of scandals where they had values, and values are these things that get printed on the wall in big letters. And I'm sure that Enron had one that was kind of like, I don't know, be trustworthy or something. And they were the opposite of that, right? And so I just I don't know what it was, and it's definitely, this isn't, I haven't invented this. I just remember kind of reading various things about just like, be careful with values because you never really know what the deal is. And actually, I think what you want is, what I like about principles is this is coming down to decision making. So this is how we operate. And values can get a bit into kind of like who we are and so on. Again, it's like, oh, we are wonderful people that just always do good things. And then it turns out that you're not. You actually need to have something which gives you a little algorithm for what you're going to do in that moment. And as part of a high-performing company, a high-performing team, you're going to give a lot of autonomy. And I've got views on like how much autonomy you give, but you give a kind of, I call it boundaried autonomy. And within that, there's a big trust. You want people to be able to just go at the problem as fast as they can do. And so the operating principles should, if they're done well, help you to optimize on trade-offs. And they should make the same trade-offs that the co-founders would do. And so for us, although we kind of make it really simple of this, it boils down to kind of think big, move fast, leave it better. Within those, there are 3 principles, kind of sub-principles per one. So we've got 9 in total, and then there's one that underpins the whole thing, which is customers at the core. And within those, they've got descriptions, which we did as a team on various kind of team days, just evolving them, giving examples. And so people really understand. So we've got one called Today, Not Tomorrow, which is about getting learnings today, not tomorrow. It's not about working super late and kind of really hurting your or kind of harming the sustainability of your kind of working. Today, not tomorrow is just what could we do that would mean that we'd get the learnings today? And it's just this fascinating question. Whenever you ask it, people always come up with some way that you could actually get the stuff now. It's just like, oh, look, we're not going to be able to ship this until next week. And it's like, is there any today, not tomorrow option here where we could find something out today? People are just like, yeah, actually, yeah, there's a part of this that's ready to go now. And perhaps we could just ship it to the pro community and like, now we're talking, and so you just ask that same question. And if you teach other people to ask the same question of other people and spot when we're kind of, a thing is sneaking into the wrong day, you just have this advantage. And that's an operating principle that's working really nicely.
Given that I've heard you say that speed as a habit is the most important of your 3 operating principles, can you go into the 2 sub principles within speed? Obviously, Today, Not Tomorrow is one of them. What are the other 2? Yeah,
so we've got one that I hope it's still sort of is relevant. We call it Kipchoge, not Bolt. And I only say that because Kipchoge is not in the news as much as he was. So Kipchoge ran the first ever sub 2-hour marathon. Everybody who knows anything about running was pretty kind of, it was very much in agreement. There was full consensus that was impossible. And this guy found a way to get a pace that he could just repeat over and over. And now this is it's a quick pace. This is sub 4 minutes 30 miles, I believe. And you do it 26 times over. It's not for everybody. It's not for the faint-hearted. But it's been a great one for us, where what we don't want is, and I have seen these folks really celebrated in other companies, we don't want bolts. So bolts can knock something out with this incredible heroics, often individual heroics, and sort of kill themselves in the process. And so they sort of pull these 2 4 a.m.s in a row, and it's like, look, I got it done, and and they're just broken, and then they're off the next week. And I hate seeing that. And I did that myself in consulting days, although you weren't allowed to take the time off the next week. But that is something that I really kind of looked out for. I was just like, I don't want that. I want there's something about being steady that is fast. When you're at this lovely steady pace, that is quick. Do I have time to tell a story?
Please.
Tell a story. Okay, so I remember in my Accenture days, we had this team day, and it was a whole bunch of different divisions coming together, and it was dragon boat racing. Now, I'd never done dragon boat racing before. I didn't know anything about it. These big old boats, and they really sit quite deep in the water. And there was, we were a bunch of kind of athletic guys in our team. And I have to admit, we were arrogantly kind of looking around and being like, we are going to smash this. And there was a group of, it was the people team. They were all sort of small women. And again, I'm just, I'm ashamed to say, we kind of looked over and just thought, yeah, we're going to beat them, and this is going to be. And I know that other people looked over and thought the same. So the boats were going in; it was two at a time going up against each other. And the first team up against the people team, the people team's boat, they were kind of laughing. And I know the answer to this as to why they'd snuck some alcohol actually into their bags. So they were busy getting drunk through this whole team building day. So they were in good spirits, even right from the start. And when they set off, their boat just lifted out of the water and they just flew. It was honestly like seeing this boat gliding above the water, just beautiful, and just whooped the other team, and everyone on the side was like, what just happened there? So it's into the next one where I think we were up against them and we put everything into it, just absolutely trying to smash them, rowing like our hearts out, and just watched the people team. Oh my goodness, it was just beautiful. It's just so quick, and they were just having so much fun with it, because they were also getting drunk, I think, but they were just enjoying being so high performing. And it turned out a couple of them had done it before, and they knew the secret. The secret is all about your rhythm. It's about being in perfect synchrony. So if someone sets the rhythm, if the oars go in at the same time, the boat lifts out the water, and then you just have no friction, and the thing just really flies. If you are actually kind of jerkily trying to put too much effort in, it goes slowly. So it's a great team building exercise, right? And they totally cracked the code and obviously kind of won the day. And it just, for me, it was a great lesson in high performing teams who kind of really enjoyed it, but also just about the steadiness of it. This how, if you can get in the rhythm, and those of you, if you've been in a really great team, often it didn't feel that hard to go really fast. That's the beauty of it. And when you see Kipchoge doing his stuff, it's a team effort. He actually said as soon as he finished and did the 2 hour sub 2 hour marathon, he was like, this was a team effort. So with dozens of people who helped with the training, and then on the day they're actually running in an arrow formation, trying to break up the wind resistance, so on, the planning of the course and so on. It's massive kind of team effort. And they had his pace kind of being set by a whole bunch of different pace setters to come in who could only keep up with a 4 minutes 30 for a couple of miles. And you realize like how incredible that can be, but how beautiful like it is to go fast when you're doing it in this sort of smooth and steady way. And that's why we have Kipchoge, not Bolt.
That's a wonderful story. Great representation. How do you figure out your Kipchoge pace?
That has been an interesting one. The easier thing to do, I would say, is to know when you're not on it. So you just know when you're going too slowly and people are frustrated, and you kind of look back on the week and you've lost the week. Or sometimes, like, which, and this is awful in startups, you've lost the month. And when you're a default dead company, with a certain amount of runway, those are really kind of tragic. If you lose a quarter, then it's incredibly traumatizing. But so you can spot when you're not on it, and you also spot when it's become quite bolty, and people are beginning to sort of hurt. So have this phrase about kind of blood, sweat, and tears, and what I love is a piece of work, a project that arrives, that's delivered sweaty, right? So you ship something and everyone's got sweaty, then that is fun. That was a real result. If it's got some blood and tears on it, actually, I don't want it. I'm just like, okay, great, we got the feature out, or we managed to get the thing launched, but it was at too high a cost. And then I'm worried about kind of that person burning out, or that team burning out. We did a lot of that at Monzo. I think people really got kind of bloody teary, and then we're burning out, and then you just kind of other teams would jump in and then do the same for a bit, and it just wasn't great. And so I knew I didn't want to run a company in that way, although the actual kind of results of Monzo are incredible, and now it's worth, I don't know, 5 billion plus. So it is a way of doing it, but it's not our way of doing it. And I don't think it's like that now, by the way. I think it's a very, very different place to how it was when we were scaling at that pace.
And so then if you go back to the hiring point, when you're in the interview and you're trying to gauge whether someone has a similar Kipchoge pace as the team, is that something you can figure out in the hiring process? Is that more for the probation period?
Ooh, the Kipchoge nut bolt is a tough one to pick out. And so you're looking for other signals, I guess, that are proxies for this. You look for people who maybe get a little bit frustrated with the status quo. Although too much of that can also be a bit disruptive with the team if you've just got someone who's just constantly frustrated with everything. But when it comes to pace, like people who mention about trying to make things faster the whole time, that's a great sign. And so really to find your Kipchoge pace, Kipchoge didn't go out there and just start running 4-minute 30 miles. He figured out what fast looked like, and then what were the barriers for him to go faster. Like what were the things that were getting in the way, and that's a process in itself. And so it's not about, if you grab a team and just say go fast, you'll just get a big fat mess. Instead, you gradually put your foot down on the accelerator, and you're gradually working your way through the gears and trying to establish the whole time through feedback mechanisms if there is another gear there to go, and try find that new gear. And there just always is. There are always opportunities in any part of any process, especially ones involving humans, but actually I think involving anything, where you can take it to another level. You just got to identify them and put the work in to try to eliminate them.
Can you give us an example of a feedback loop that led you to go into the next gear up in a Cherrypick process?
Yeah. So we're in the business of building software, and that's not success in and of itself, but our ability to ship is going to be a kind of key bottleneck, I suppose. And so your product development process, going from identifying the customer problem to having something that solves that in the product, although ideally you've done some nice validation on the way. That's going to be kind of one of the key elements that leads to your success if you're getting that right. And so there's so many different things, I guess, that we've done across that process. To give a couple of examples, one is we used to assume that you had to ship to learn. And so sometimes the kind of today, not tomorrow got a bit misinterpreted in a thing of like, okay, get it in the product and let's kind of find out. And a lot of times that can be really great to get that customer feedback. But if you are really good at this and thinking about speed as a habit, then you know that your engineering time is the single kind of most precious resource that you have. So I only really want engineers to be building stuff that we know is going to work. So it has to have been validated. And we were often skipping or accelerating that kind of customer validation process, or not even bothering. We just kind of thought we understood the problem well enough, thought we had a solution. And most of the stuff on our roadmap, we have a lot of things that we've already thought about. It's like, great, people are shouting about this, so here's the solution, and let's just ship it. And that validation process, while it might appear to slow things down, getting the designer, product manager to speak to customers really quickly and just show them some stuff, or knocking together a design prototype, that's a lot faster than coding it. And so it was a really simple way, getting customer validation done at the design stage. That was a really simple way of improving our hit rate for once something was in the product, it being a success. And so you have a really good confidence. It's like, yeah, great. Customers are going to like this because we have already tested it on them in a kind of simplistic way using a design prototype or whatever that might be. So that's the type of things that you're kind of thinking of. On the engineering side, I remember we had a slightly kind of convoluted release process, and I just don't know how it came about because we weren't a huge team, but you just end up organically. I think things just gradually get more convoluted and more complex. That just is a thing. I think that's actually just how the universe works, full stop. That's certainly kind of how my study works. My desk just gets more messy over time. It just degrades to mess. And you have to really consciously undo that. Same with your garden, same with anything, right? And so that happens in tech. And it's fascinating, especially with certain people who kind of think certain things are really important. We've got to do things the right way. You can end up with a process that's not as agile as it once was, and I mean agile with a small a, not the kind of agile methodology. And so we need to fight against that, and you kind of constantly need to fight against that, and especially if you have multiple engineers. Everybody brings their own thing that they think is really important in the release process, and it just ends up just becoming a beast. And it was good. I mean, we had to get smaller as a team when we were cost cutting last year, which was really tough. But we also took the opportunity to just really kind of slim things down. And then the weird thing is you end up going faster than you were doing with more engineers. And so it's a great lesson, I think, to everybody, just about like making sure you're pruning the whole time.
One thing that came to mind as I was listening to you speaking was there's this balance between moving quickly, but then also going slow to go fast. If you go quickly in the wrong direction, you're still going in the wrong direction. And actually, it's not helpful that you're moving quickly. And so you going slow to go fast was doing this customer validation with every product cycle.
Yes, I actually slightly disagree with that statement. Am I allowed to?
Please, yeah, amazing.
Okay. It's just the thing that I have figured out over doing 4 startups is, for the most part, running even in the wrong direction a bit overall is faster, which is kind of fascinating. And I don't know if this kind of goes against everything that everybody else out there says, but this is just my view on things. And I think it is a waste of time to knock out features that haven't been validated. That is mostly just not a clever use of your most precious resource, which is your engineer's time. But I've seen teams just debate, and I've been part of those debates and just opinions really going back and forth, where we're really worried about getting something wrong. And overall, in every single case, it's always been better to just get into it. Always. It's always better to just actually start moving. And the only thing that you need for that to work is a very quick correcting process as you get more data. So what's happening if you are stuck in, we have a thing called data over debate, and that's sometimes been misused. Or what that really means is go quickly to get data by kind of getting cracking, rather than have people just going back and forth with opinions, because opinions are just worthless. Like, we've all got them. And mostly my opinions are wrong. I've realized it's actually just every time, like, go get the data, and you do that by getting in the game. So I absolutely now advocate and tell anybody else, just get in the game, and you will figure it out much, much quicker than if you stand there being like, oh, but is that the wrong direction? It's just like, you just so quickly know it's the wrong mountain because nothing is working in the way that you thought it was going to be. Then just get back down it and get back up another one. And you're still faster than the team that's sat there being like, oh, look at that mountain. Is that the right one? Or is that the right one? It's just like, let's just go, get climbing.
Okay, love that. That was a great pushback. Anytime that you hear anything I say that you're like bollocks, then please call me out, because
I don't remember saying bollocks, but I just said
I did, it's fine.
I actually disagree with that, and it's just that is how I personally feel.
Yeah, I suppose I think about me and this content journey as well. I spent last year just running, and after a while, I didn't have the feedback loops because I wasn't actually posting episodes, and so therefore, like that would have brought my challenge to light a lot sooner. But this year, I've been like, I spent a year recording a bunch of interviews, and then only to realize then at the end of the year that actually that's not the great structure of content that I think will help the target audience, and actually that's the insight I've come to this year. And now I've kind of in this, not rabbit in the headlights moment, but I'm here kind of a little bit stuck going like, God, I really don't want to run at something again and just keep going and it be the wrong direction again. So that's a really great reminder that actually, if it's a short enough cycle and there's the necessary feedback loops, then actually you'll know soon enough, and then you'll be able to course correct.
So if you'd have got those episodes out, you would have got that feedback from your audience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So ship it.
Yeah. So then what's the third speed operating principle? We've got Kipchoge, not Bolt. We've got today, not tomorrow. What's the third one?
Third one's data over debate. So I mentioned it briefly before, and it is a speed principle because what happens is teams get paralyzed, especially if it's a kind of bigger decision. And weirdly, people just bring opinions, and opinions, I don't value opinions, especially I don't value my own opinion. I feel like my judgment is quite regularly off, and data surprises me. Whereas you can't lie with the data, or basically when you're looking at data, you can interpret it in different ways, but ultimately the data won't lie. The only frustration I ever have with data is if people don't believe the data. That's really annoying. So you get people who are very, very good at producing the data. We used to have the most amazing business analysts who it was just so good at that. So you always had massive confidence that the data was good. And then you should be looking at it and sort of saying, okay, what does this mean based on the hypothesis? And that gives you the kind of way to go. And ideally, you're getting that data from real customers because you kind of cracked into it in some way. Either you're talking to them, you're showing them something, or you've shipped if that is the right thing to do.
Speaking of data, before you started, you did customer interviews where you got data from 1,000 families before you started Cherrypick. That is an obscene amount of data, which obviously drove incredible insights, and now you've set the company up incredibly well. But is there this diminishing marginal returns on how much data you should be getting?
That is a great question. So first of all, let's talk about customer data and the reason for doing that. So when I was starting out, I didn't know if this was a good idea or not. And this was a problem that we had in Cherrypick. This is a problem that we had in our own household. Basically, my son Freddie was born ahead of schedule, threw our lives into chaos, and we just couldn't make it to the supermarkets. And so I needed to do online shopping, and I'd picked out some nice recipes and just found it a massive hassle to like writing down all the ingredients and then putting it into my online shopping basket. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to build something that puts this all in one place. Now, we were not enjoying the process of getting the shop done each week, and we wanted to be eating well. We wanted to be kind of cooking, and it just all felt too cumbersome. And I knew friends who had the same problem, but that's not enough to kind of build a business off and spend, it's now been like 5 years of my life and all the kind of personal capital and so on that kind of goes into it. And so you've got to go and validate that. So we're still in what I'd call the customer discovery phase. And I spoke to a lot of people. So this was COVID. So that was actually a great time for speaking to people. There wasn't much else I could do, and spoke with over 100 families, busy families, and was just hearing the same themes coming up about it. It's sad to say in this day and age, still mums, 85% mums who are responsible for the shopping and the cooking. I'm talking about how stressful it was just trying to get this stuff done and get the family fed, and saying, look, if I don't do it, then literally there's nothing for the kids to eat. So, that is a horrible thing to have kind of hanging over you. And had a mum that was like, it was 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, and she had booked the slot for the next day just with a placeholder, just a bottle of champagne. And she realized that was all that was coming to feed the family for the week, this bottle of champagne. And she had to roll out of bed, find her phone, and put together a shop. And I thought, okay, now I've heard this enough. I want to do something about it. But I wanted the kind of quant piece as well as the qual. And so we did a big survey, 1,000 people. And again, just some great kind of themes coming out of it. With about 80% of people spending over an hour a week on their meal planning and shopping. I thought, okay, great. I can get rid of that. We now have a feature called the 2-minute shop. And it's really right from that insight that came nearly 5 years ago. What's been interesting is keeping that going. So keeping the voice of the customer going. And I think we're big believers in this. Like, we stay close to the customers, and we, if anything, we probably do collect too much feedback, but it's never been a problem. So, that's not a thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing. And we use it. So we have people rate every single order. Every time they finish the shop, then we ask them how the experience was. And that comes through to our Slack. And I have the notifications on. I see every single comment, through, we get thousands and thousands of people ordering, all the time. So I like it. You're just kind of staying close to customers, and even just seeing the stars. And like, if someone gives you a 1-star rating, I really want to see kind of what's happened to them. And that's been good for App Store ratings. We've got 4.4 on both App Stores. We've been on a journey with that when we went from free to premium. Watched that go to 2.2 stars, which was incredibly depressing period. Now back to 4.4 again. And I think that we're there because we have collected feedback internally all that time, and then reacted to the kind of problems that people have mentioned, so that it is just a well-reviewed app. We don't do Trustpilot because we haven't needed to, but we may well implement that as well. But these kind of ways are good. And even recently, I realized actually we still weren't close enough to customers. So we're getting this channel through, this flow through what I call a sort of temperature check, I suppose, of what's happening order to order. And we do, by the way, kind of net promoter surveys and similar things every kind of 6 months to just get this kind of wider picture. But we didn't really have any way of getting into dialogue with customers. So I've launched a community for our pro users. So these are folks who are paying for premium, and actually they're paying for the more expensive premium. We love them. They are obviously fans of the product, and they're critical for actually subsidizing all of our free users. And so I wanted to do something for them, and part of that proposition for pro, I think of it in terms of like access and excess. Excess being that they could use more of anything, pretty much unlimited of any feature. But access is a really important part of that, where they could have direct access to the founders and to the team. And so we set up a community, just done it in WhatsApp for now. And it's already amazing. So literally this is kind of last week, and just kind of said, hey, look, right, we can kind of get together. We've got loads of people sign up for it straight away. And we're working on a very, very cool new feature around health, being able to kind of show people exactly actually ultra-processed foods, which is great, ultra-processed ingredients of what's going into their meals and into their basket. And we've been able to get feedback from them directly, like through the community, which is just awesome. So look, here's what we're thinking. I gave them a sneak peek, and it's like, great, I really wanted to reduce UPFs this year, and so on. And that's been a gap that even though I thought we were kind of close to customers, actually being able to get into conversation with them is another level again. So there's always kind of more you can do on this.
So it sounded like you had the quant data when someone had finished their user journey and they gave you the feedback at the end of every shop, but you were missing the qualitative data. Now you've focused on your core super users, i.e. your pro users, and then you're getting the qual data back from them. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I would really say that we get the quant being the rating, but we ask for comments as well. So, and when people have got extreme views, then they will give you the comments, and so that gives you qual. Like that gives you actual insights that are just, it might just be that user, but normally that means multiple people are kind of having the same problem, and we will spend the time on it. Even if it is just one person like really frustrated about something, then I do want to understand why. And so we're kind of getting the qual there. And you get qual kind of ongoing anyway when you're doing customer validation, because you've got an idea about how you're going to do things. And we've been a bit kind of lax recently on that side, but we're going to get back into it. And the pro community is a great way to do that. So just showing them early stuff of what we're thinking before it goes too far, so that when we do the proper launch, it's been validated.
Got you. But back to the question of diminishing returns.
Oh, are there diminishing returns?
Because this applies both with like before you started the company, you chat to 100 people and then you got 1,000 responses on a form. Is that right? Is that a form?
Yeah, we surveyed 1,000. So the diminishing returns, why do that number? When it comes to the qual side, my view on qual research is once you start hearing the same stuff again, then you've done it enough. And you can kind of stop your interviews on that topic. And what was interesting for us was we weren't necessarily hearing the same things. We heard quite a wide variety of problems. Generally, everybody hated the process. So 2/3 of the people we spoke to hated they're doing the shop. And in fact, we got people to rank whether they'd rather do other household chores. And about 20% of people would rather clean the toilet than do the shop, the weekly shop. So they really hated it. But the reasons why were varied. And so my insight from that, and that's how I ended up getting to 100, and also because I didn't have much else to do because it was COVID and I couldn't raise any money yet. My hypothesis is there were multiple segments. And so grocery was an interesting beast here. Actually, there were folks, everybody thinks of themselves as busy. There were folks who really were kind of, I suppose, overwhelmed. There were folks who were optimizing more for health. There were folks who really cared about saving money, and were a bit worried about kind of cost of living and food inflation and so on. And so actually, I had to speak to quite a lot of people to begin to identify those segments. And that's the reason why I wasn't getting the repeat. And then once I got good at identifying the segments, it was much easier to spot the patterns, because as people mentioned a lot of times about trying to eat better and eat healthier and so on, and like doing the right things for their kids, it's like, okay, great, your health. And I have a few ideas about the type of things that matter to you. I could steer the conversation there, and then I was getting the repeat. And then I knew I had enough. I had the sort of N. It's different on quant. I think with quant, I do think 1,000 is, especially if you're going to raise money off it, 1,000 is a really convincing number. So when I said to investors, here's 1,000 families, and 2/3 of them kind of hate the status quo. So do you want to put some money into building something different? That was pretty convincing.
That is very convincing. You're right. And you put it into the sector.
But if you say it's 100 people, it's like, oh, okay, but is it 100 of your mates or whatever? 1,000 strangers. Yeah. That's good.
You mentioned as well an issue with your ratings when you went from free to paid. Going from free to paid seems like this very daunting challenge. Can you talk to your experience of that transition?
Yeah, you're going to make me cry if I have to sort of go through this, but I will recollect what was definitely a tricky time for the business. So I don't mind saying we're a venture capital-backed company. And at the start of last year, so you're kind of default dead when you're VC backed, and you're only as good as your kind of next cash injection on the route to profitability. And we were sort of relying on getting another decent cash injection at the start of last year, and the VC market just dried up. It was tough. It was brutal. And especially for consumer companies just went right out of fashion because they just have a kind of longer route before they really scale. And so, and I'd taken my eye off the ball. We didn't make enough money. We didn't make enough revenue for our customer base. We had at that stage probably 250,000 customers, but the actual kind of total revenue was not significant enough. And so we couldn't raise investment. and it was rubbish. And the realization was, gosh, maybe 4 years of work at that stage, and these like 250,000 customers, this is all going to be for nothing. We're going to go bust. And so we had to really quickly pull things together. We cut our costs down, which is really unfun, like lots and lots of things. But it did include having to kind of reduce the size of the team, which is really, really tough, and saying goodbye to some really great people who played a big part in getting us to where we'd got to. But it was necessary. And we needed revenue. So we were not going to be able to do it just from taking a cut of the basket commission, which is how we had been doing it. Supermarkets kind of giving us a little kind of cut. We needed to start to charge customers. And it was really important to us that we kept a free tier. So that was a big decision. And actually, I want to keep that forever. So that's a kind of commitment that there will always be this free tier, because some people just can't afford it. I want them still to be able to benefit from our product. But we introduced Plus and Pro, and my biggest learning from that was we did it fast, and we had to, and that was not ideal. I remember when we introduced ATM fees for international withdrawals at Monzo, and we just did such an amazing job on the comms, and actually even asked our customers what different fees they would like. And we got amazing press off this, Monzo, the bank that asked its customers kind of how they want to get charged. And my friends were really jealous. They're like, I can't believe it, even Monzo introduced fees and everyone thinks you're amazing. This was not the case when Cherrypick made this step. We did it fast, and we got punished for it. We didn't take people on the journey. And a lot of people were really shocked and sad. And that's tough. And it would have been okay, I think, if they had just sort of silently quit. But instead, they hit it's particularly Android. They hit our Android rating, and it hurt us way more than they could ever know, because once you drop below 4 stars, Android takes you off the kind of search results. And I just watched this rating that we'd worked so hard to build just tank all for one thing, which was people saying, I love this app so much, and I've been recommending it to all my friends, and now they want to charge me 1 star. And I was like, gosh, thank you for your support. It's really, really tough. So we had to take it, and we knew that we were not a 2.2 star app. And obviously we responded to all those comments and so on, and you're shifting segments. This is what's happening. We had a lot of people who had no intentions of ever paying for us, or perhaps for any apps. And we had within that a small core who were really loyal, and they were willing to pay, which is great. Even though they'd been used to us as being free, they were like, okay, we get it. And thank goodness for those folks. We wouldn't have survived without them. And then we had to kind of build up a new customer base of folks who are happy to pay. And all the new folks are just like, yeah, of course, this is like full of amazing features, and this is giving me huge value. Of course I would pay for this. And they give us great ratings, and we're back at 4.4 stars again. So it's been a really interesting journey. And in some ways, the learning could be, perhaps we should always have been a paid app. Like, that should have always been there. And these things are scales anyway. You can choose how much you want to lean into one or the other, based on how generous you are with each of the propositions. So we could have had something where kind of paid was always there, but maybe for 5-10% of people. But that wasn't a decision that we took. We thought free was the way, and we thought we could build the business based on the old revenue model. It just wasn't possible. And I just wish that I'd helped people understand that, so that they would have been more forgiving, and we would have had an easier time last summer.
Oof.
What about your comms?
What about comms? Yeah. Was there not, when going into this, would you not have known that you had to be paid at some point? Because I'm assuming the story that you tell to VCs in terms of like, how are you going to return on investment? Is there not going to be a point where like you have to have these tiers?
If we'd have raised again and the market had been strong, then we'd have been fine. So yes, we could get there, but by doing cut a basket, we needed real scale. So we were kind of on that path, but it was going to take time, and we needed somebody to kind of fund us through that time. And in the old world in VC, that was fine. People were more concerned about if you're building a great product and you're growing. And that just massively changed. And it was just the year before last, so 2023, it was a really rapid shift. And suddenly it wasn't about growth anymore. It was about revenue, and particularly recurring revenue, ideally. And so VC moved into like safe bets, particularly B2B, SaaS. So this is like selling to businesses with kind of software as a service, subscription models. And you just get locked in. And those are just great businesses, not terribly exciting businesses, but great businesses, because, you know, if you're a company, you just need this tool, and you just have hundreds of people doing it, and you're paying thousands of pounds out each month, and you just don't think about it. As an individual, obviously, every time you're charged for something, you really do think about it. I still think about my Netflix subscription. I would never, ever get rid of it, but it's just like, it's there as this thing going out. And so this was the problem, basically. Kind of VCs were not keen to fund these kind of long-term games of like building up scale and then monetizing. I didn't see the market shift fast enough. That's totally on me. And I hadn't built a real business.
How could you have seen the market shift?
I think through 2023, if I'd been, because we weren't raising, it just wasn't totally relevant to me. And I think, I suppose I just hadn't tested. I think if I'd have been using my VC calls well, because normally you keep your relationships up with VCs, and even when you're not raising, they want to know kind of how you're progressing. And I think I probably could have asked a better question about, you know, what are you prioritizing at the moment? And just, I think I would have heard the shift in their kind of metrics. That I mean, and I kind of did. They were saying revenue more, but I just feel like I just wasn't hearing it enough. And I thought, we're still good. So maybe there was just kind of a bit of denial about it. But definitely using those VC conversations, that would have been the route. And you just kind of test that. You want to say, look, these are the metrics that we're aiming for to do the next round. Is that kind of what you agree with? And I thought I was sort of doing that. But evidently not enough, because I was getting head nods. But the reality was when I actually kind of took my cap off and was like, right, stuff your money in, it was staying reasonably empty. We did manage to pull together a round in summer, I might add, but it was a struggle.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
The thing that's standing out to me listening to you is something that having listened to so many founders and listened to so many autobiographies of founders, is this quite self-critical nature, like you're very hard on yourself, and which I'm the same as, and I think so many founders are. And it seems to be this recurring quality of lots of great founders and great leaders, which leads me into this general topic around leadership. And having spoken to Chris, he said you did a lot of, or you do a lot of reflection. And so I'd love to hear your general approach and principles towards how you have developed as a leader, what type of leader you are, how you think about that.
When you step back and just try and think about, I guess, your personal operating principles, I think that helps you to define your leadership style. And our family motto is always be kind. And we actually have this as a neon sign that sits on our exposed brick wall, in the classic kind of middle-class stereotype here, but basically it sits on our wall. And, you know, we point to it when the kids are yelling, or sometimes me and my wife have to point to it when we're yelling at each other. And I tried to take that into business. Now, just to be very clear, I have not always been kind. And I think that's been a journey. And I think what's been really disappointing is a couple of times at my previous startups, I let the stress turn me into a jerk. And then I've been a jerk with other people, jerk with my team. or whoever it might be. And I think sort of jerkness is contagious. So sadly, they take that sort of, or stress-induced jerkness. This is making up stuff here, but stress-induced.
Name your next book.
yeah. Stress-induced jerkness is contagious. Sadly, if that's what's been given to you, and to be fair, it had been given to me, by sort of, other folks who are also feeling pressure. Then I was kind of passing that on, and I really regret that. And the interesting thing is that what I'm optimizing for is high-performing team, put very simply. But I think I've adapted that now into I'm optimizing for kind of high-performing happy teams, right? And if you forget that bit, you can get high-performance unhappy teams. You can get it, and I've heard that, let's say that there's a very, very successful unicorn out there that I've heard is not a fun place to work for, fintech, and I don't think anyone is happy there, but it's a really high-performing team. Good grief, they are executing, and they're in 100 countries, and they've done very well. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. But I believe that you can build a great company with a high-performing, happy team, and that's kind of been the principle for Cherrypick, which is why we got the operating principles in place. And one of the operating principles was Kipchoge, not Bolt, about this. It's just a lovely way of putting on the brakes, or anybody can call that. Anybody can say we're not being Kipchoge about it. And it really kind of pulled that together. We had another phrase as well, which was hard on problems, not people, which I nicked from Monzo. And I have to admit, at Monzo, we weren't actually very good at it, but it was a very good operating principle. And so I sort of stole it and then made it a real thing, where if somebody was being kind of tough on a person rather than the problem, we were kind of forgetting that we were just all trying to get to the truth, I'd be very tough on them. That's a sort of big no-no. And so I think that's kind of the heart of my leadership style. I think the saying goodbye to people is a thing. And this is it's an interesting part of being kind, because I think I probably told my old self, saying goodbye, getting rid of people is not being kind. And I'm now very confident that's wrong and that it's the opposite. And I'd say that to other people as well if I was giving advice. If somebody is just not suited to that role or company, then it's not kind trying to push them to kind of perform well in that place. And I always remember my wife saying to me, she had a company where sort of things didn't work out, and someone had said, look, sometimes you're a penguin in the desert. And like, penguins are really, really good at what they do, but that's not being in a desert environment, right? That is, they need to be in the Arctic. And meanwhile, if you're kind of well suited for desert conditions, you would not kind of do well in brutally cold conditions. And so I think about that a lot when I was looking at performance, kind of individual performance, and sort of saying, okay, I know that you're a smart person because I've only ever hired smart people. I'm really, really happy with my hiring bar. We only ever get really, and especially for Cherrypick, we only ever get really brilliant people in through the door. But lots of people haven't worked out. And that's just been because the operating principle kind of wasn't necessarily there. Or maybe the role was different to what we thought. And it's just no reflection at all on that individual's talent level. It's just this role in place isn't right. And that, being honest about that, is kind. That is kind. And I'm really kind of confident. I really sort of feel like I can back myself that we've made the right decisions on saying goodbye to people and still held true to the always be kind kind of principle that now is pervasive across my leadership, or try to be.
So how are you kind in firing people?
We have a review process that's mostly every 6 months, and sometimes been a little bit informal about it, but definitely a kind of formal one at the annual level. And what you're looking for there is the exact same things that you were doing when you were hiring them. So the hard skills and the operating principles. And this is different from coaching. So you're coaching through the year and trying to guide people, especially to sort of make it to the next level. But at the review, I do think it's really important that you're explicit about where you're at. And so our review, and not everybody will agree with this, but our review has ratings on it. And it says whether you're kind of performing at level, you're exceeding expectations, you're outperforming. And you kind of can't hide that. And if you've asked your folks who manage other people to do the same, then it's this forcing function to just sort of say, if you've got someone that's underperforming, now is the time. And I'd be super mad if we have an underperformer who then ends up getting managed out where that wasn't flagged in their review, the last review. And so that I think is great, even if managers haven't been doing their bit of, so we try and do kind of what we call a PD chat a couple of times a quarter where it's specifically just about the person in the role. And it's much more kind of coachy and you go for a walk and so on, but you're still trying to figure out the elements of like where they're at and where they want to get to. There should be messaging there if all's going right. There should be messaging there if you're kind of off track. But certainly at the review point, you'll get a very, very clear signal. You are underperforming, and underperforming means a route out unless kind of things get fixed. And if need be, we'll do that review, off cycle to sort of say, hey, look, you're underperforming. This is what's happening. And so I just think it's about being really open about where the person is, because you're not doing them any favors if you're not being honest that they're not at level in some way, or they're not doing the operating principles. And we've had to say goodbye to people who have been not aligned on the operating principles. And that can be really toxic for the company if you let that go too long. And in so many cases on the operating principles side, I've regretted letting people kind of stick around for longer than they should have done that were taking us off in the wrong direction. So that's a really important one to kind of jump on it.
This is a problem or a challenge that I find so many people that I interview have, is this balance between being kind and caring and then also trying to push people to grow and level up and evolve. I'm assuming these review periods and how you measure people against hard skills and operating principles is part of that. What are the other nuances when it comes to this balancing act between being kind, but then also, well, I don't know whether it is the opposite of being kind if you're really pushing someone to grow and evolve, and at what point is the point where you realize actually they're not going to grow and evolve, or they're not right for this team?
Yeah, sometimes they are in conflicts with each other, but mostly they shouldn't be. My feel is if we're hiring the right people, they are ambitious people who want to grow. And that is one of our operating principles. And so it's kind of always be learning. And so the kindest thing that you can do for people who are desperately wanting to just get better is help them get better. And if that's not their mindset, they are probably in the wrong place. So I think for the most part, our hiring's been great on that front. Like, we hire people who are just hungry to learn more. And if anything, it's hard to find enough time to make sure that they're sort of being stretched. And I think the whole kind of think big, it applies to yourself as well. This isn't about like what the company can achieve, but it's also about kind of setting perhaps a goal that feels pretty crazy for yourself. I've said to product managers, could you learn to code? And like, some are kind of up for it, some are less up for it, but it's just like, look, if you want to be able to really handle yourself with engineers and push back on them, then at the very least, you need to understand about computer science. And so, even I've kind of read basics on this. Luckily, my CTO is so amazing. I really, don't need to kind of I couldn't challenge him. I couldn't even start to challenge him. But it's been handy just knowing, after you do 4 tech startups, obviously you begin to know how tech works. That stuff is key. And so it's not kind of right in my core skill set, but it's the type of stuff that will make me even better in my role. And those are the types of things that I want to point out to people. It's like, yeah, you can keep going on your path of being, you are, already a great individual contributor. If you want to take this to the next level, it's very often kind of pulling in these different skills that are going to take some time for you to develop. And do you want to invest in yourself enough to go for it? And you can just see it in their eyes. Just most people are really excited by a kind of a bigger challenge. And then it can just be about, okay, can we actually carve out the time for you to do this? Because we're also trying to ship all the time.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. We're coming into the end. And so I have a couple of, well, it depends. It depends if you have a hard stop or not, because I definitely don't. So I could stay here all day and keep asking you questions.
I think your audience would die if we did this all day. But fine.
Couple of potentially shorter questions before we wrap up. You've been a part of 2 massive companies before Cherrypick, both Curve and Monzo. Can you speak to some of the highlight takeaway lessons from each of those 2 companies?
Yeah, and so I want to be super clear on Curve. I took it to Series A, and we secured a great Series A. And at that point, I jumped across to Monzo. So everything that's happened after that is all on the current CEO, who's done a phenomenal job. Curve was an interesting one in that it was a complex product that we didn't even know if we could build this thing. And the funniest thing is we actually were building it only for the challenge of seeing if we could, which is a terrible reason to start a business. I really wanted to know if we could do it, if we could create this card that could kind of operate as several cards in one, and just loved that. And then kind of got lucky that lots of people wanted it. I think it's now past 5 million customers. So the learnings from Curve, I think, were probably getting the value proposition right. Just understanding, like, when you've got a new thing, and I think this is very applicable to a lot of founders. When you've got a new thing, you've got to really distill down to make it super easy for a customer, like what this thing is. And so we I think kind of lent away from kind of an all-in-one card, but actually that was the simplest way to describe it. We wanted to be this financial control center, and so on. But just keeping it super, super simple of like, okay, people sadly don't care like what you're doing really. So you have to make them care. And if you make it hard for them to understand, then they will not put the effort in. So that was a great lesson, I think, for Curve, just sort of keeping it super simple. With Monzo, I think it's the biggest lesson of that journey. I think learning to scale a company at that pace, it was probably where I learned about operating principles. And so because we hired so fast and we were going so fast, we had these really amazing, we needed to be able to sort of execute fast. And we had these amazing kind of principles in place, but they weren't written down. And that was really tough for all the new folks coming in. And you've got real risk of culture dilution, especially when you ignore the kind of Google rule and end up scaling by an order of magnitude. Then you've got a lot of people, you can be in a state where 90% of people weren't there 2 years ago. That is very, very risky for culture. Very, very risky, right? You've only got 10% who actually know kind of how things used to work. So although late, we did get the principles written down, and there were these sort of five principles. One of them that has stuck with me is default to transparency. And Monzo was just unbelievably good at that. And it was actually, I think, the single biggest component of the secret sauce of Monzo, where if you want to operate really, really fast, everybody needs to have access to any data they need. And what happens in most companies is that data's kind of the most sensitive stuff's hoarded up at executive level, and execs all feel great because they know stuff other people don't know, and everything needs to come through them. And if you want autonomous teams or semi-autonomous teams to be kind of galloping horses just in the direction that they need to achieve their goals without anything getting in the way, then they've got to have access to that same data. Monzo was the real deal on that, amazingly transparent. I took that transparency, and I've done the same for Cherrypick. And then it's been really interesting as people have left Cherrypick and gone to other companies. They've contacted me and said, "Oh, we didn't realize that other companies aren't like this. You know, we're on Slack channels that are private, and like we really tried to not do Slack channels. All in all, like I want everything to be out in the public and so on. And our team doesn't want to share anything until it's like completely ready to go. And it's like, oh my goodness, you know, again, we work in plain sight. Like that's one of our core principles and so on. So it's really interesting to know that other companies don't do that necessarily. And yet it can be a massive part of a kind of differentiator for a startup. People miss out on it.
When I spoke to Chris, your co-founder, before this, I asked him what question he would ask you if he was sat in my shoes.
Ooh.
And he actually said, what's your secret sauce to startups on the whole? And so now that you've reflected on those two companies, if you extrapolate out even further, what's the secret?
It's a really good question. Trust Chris to come up with something that will stump me. I don't think I can boil it down to one thing, but I think I can put it to a sort of set of ingredients that give you the best possible chance of being successful. And so those ingredients are the mission, the operating principles, and there's probably some other component. I think it's probably about autonomy. I think that those would be the three elements. So just super quickly, mission is one that's worth not spending forever on, but is worth spending enough time that it is one that will get people out of bed. So we initially had a mission that was to save people time to spend it as they wished. It was something like that, you know. I can't remember, to give people freedom to do what matters, something like that. And it was based on this insight that we were going to save people an hour a week on their shopping. And, you know, that's not enough. There's not enough there. And the great thing was, as we got into the business, I realized we were in this the business of helping people with their food choices. And there were some really powerful things that we could do with that. We could actually help people to eat better. And if we did this on a big scale, we might be able to change some societal problems, like the fact that half the global population is going to be overweight or obese by 2035. Like, we could do something about that. So that we changed the mission to help the world eat better effortlessly. Or our more kind of grandiose one that I don't talk about too much is that we want to change the trajectory of human and planetary health. Now that's a mission that kind of gets people out of bed. So I'd say take your time and don't, whatever you do, sort of second guess your mission and keep it something small. Like go big. And operating principles we talked about a lot. So, you know, just understand like what it is for you and boil it down to three things, and they should be different for every company, every founder. Like the three things that you think are going to make your particular company outperform versus the rest, and then get really good at those things. And then on autonomy, I've been on a real journey with this, and Monzo was this incredible lesson. This was not my thing at all. I saw this working and then tried to sort of accelerate it as best I could, but we gave incredible autonomy to the teams, and it really did feel like every team was a galloping horse. And so then it's more about just trying to align on where they go. It's like, that way, horses, you know, and then hoping at the end of the quarter that they sort of arrive at the right spots. I think that that's not quite right, because sometimes some of the horses disappeared right out of the place, and you're like, oh, okay, they didn't get the memo. We've lost a quarter. So I call it boundaried autonomy. And the idea is that you set goals together But the founders still have the final say on it. So ultimately, look, that's the destination as we try to achieve the mission. And that's the boundary. But then you get out of people's way and you're like, just whatever you need. Ideally, the team has kind of got all the skills within it to be able to just go for it as an autonomous team. And that's been pretty good in terms of that balance between speed and kind of speed in the right direction. So I think that's sort of what it boils down to for me.
Incredibly articulate. Honestly, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I can really hear and feel the experience that you have, and it's like so incredibly varied, which is coupled with these like amazing personal operating principles, which obviously have rippled into the company. And I'm just so excited for Cherrypick and what you guys are doing. As a
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Closing tradition on the show, given that you've been so generous with your time, is there something that an audience of entrepreneurs could support you with?
Oh, yes. Download the app.
5-star reviews.
Yes.
Bump it up from 4.4 to 4.5.
Yes. Be nice to us in reviews. But yeah, download the app, and I can probably give you a discount code if you like to when you're sharing this. So I'll give you one, and you can give it to your audience.
Very kind. Well, amazing. Thank you so much. It's been great.
No worries. Thanks for having me.